Welcome to Understanding Your Past Data webinar. My name is Finn McClelland, and I'm a member of the Assessment Insights team here at GL. During this session, I will be providing you with greater insights into the survey, reports and data, and what to look for when analysing your own reports. This webinar is aimed at schools who have already administered the past survey or plan to imminently, and want to feel more confident in understanding and using the data. Just to let you know that my colleague Anne will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions whilst we're going through the webinar, please just pop the questions into the chat, and Anne may answer them there and then, or she may save them until the end when we'll have some time to answer those questions. Okay, my colleague Steph's just going to pop my camera off now. Now you've all had a look at me, so you can concentrate on the information on the screen. Okay, so the overarching objective of this training session is to gain a deeper understanding of the past reports and what the data can tell you about your students. We will be discussing the 9 past factors, going through analysis of the scores on both a group and individual level, looking into how to compare your past data with CAT4 results, which, amongst other elements, will support with identifying fragile learners. Finally, we'll end by looking at next steps with the past interventions and further support from GL Education. So, what is pupil attitudes to self and school? Well, PASS is a quick psychometric test. It is a well-being survey that provides a measure of students' attitudes towards their school context and towards themselves as learners that was developed by educational psychologists. It enables you to identify issues that could prevent a student reaching their full potential, guide pastoral support at whole school, cohort or individual level, monitor the impact of wellbeing intervention programs, and identify invisible groups, such as fragile learners. In this section, we'll be looking at the key concepts central to PASS and explaining the key terminology you'll be coming across in your reports. PASS is based upon 9 standardized measures or factors. Preparedness for learning, which looks at areas such as study skills, attentiveness, and concentration. Perceived learning capability, which offers an insight into a pupil's level of self-respect, determination, and openness to learning. Learner self-regard, which is equivalent to self-worth, is focused specifically on self-awareness as a learner, highlighting levels of motivation and determination. Confidence in learning, which identifies a pupil's ability to think independently and to persevere when faced with a challenge. General work ethic, which highlights the pupil's aspirations and motivation to succeed in life. Response to curriculum demands, which focuses more narrowly on school-based motivation to undertake and complete curriculum-based tasks. Attitudes to attendance, which enables teachers to recognize early those students who are at most risk of truancy. Attitude to teachers, which measures a young person's perception of the relationships they have with the adults within their school. And finally, feelings about school, which explores whether a pupil feels secure, confident, and included in their learning community. This is a suggested level of analysis schools can use to analyze the past data, especially if looking at each factor in isolation seems unmanageable. The past domains is an approach developed and used by Matthew Savage, former principal of the International Community School, Amman. You can choose to analyze each of the 9 factors separately. However, an approach developed by Matthew Savage may make the analysis more manageable. He has split the factors across 3 different domains. Domain 1, the self, which measures how students feel about themselves as learners. Domain 2, the interface, which measures how a student engages with their school and learning experience. And thirdly, externals, which measures how students perceive the school environment. Should you want further information about this approach, you can watch a short video about it on our website. PASS should be administered throughout the academic year so that it can be used in the most effective manner. The first step is completing the survey. Once students have completed their survey, the next step is to analyse the data. The data can be analysed easily with your PASS reports at whole cohort, key group, and individual levels in order to ensure that all aspects of student school life are supported. Once you have identified your key areas of focus and with whom this is needed, which may be at whole cohort, group, or individual level, step 3 can begin. Our PASS Online Interventions Toolkit will provide you with a range of interventions and resources to support you at all levels. Once interventions and support have been put in place, the PASS survey can be re-administered, as seen in step 4. It is advised that this takes place a minimum of 12 weeks after its first administration. An analysis of this new set of data will help you to compare your previous PASS data. This will allow you to evaluate the impact of interventions and any additional support put in place. It will also help you to identify your future next steps. The two forms in which data is presented is through percentiles and percentages. To start with, we are going to look at percentiles. Percentiles are standardized and provide a comparison to the national norms. They are also color-coded to help quickly spot high and low scores. For example, it is easy to pinpoint those scores in red, which highlight scores within the lowest 5% compared to the national sample. These should be taken as an immediate area of concern, whereas a score of 95 places them within the top 5% of the national sample. Percentages, on the other hand, are non-standardized. Mean percentage scores show a percentage of maximum positivity within the school. That is to say, if students within a school were to respond to, on average, 5 questions positively out of a maximum 10 questions in a factor, then their non-standardized mean percentage score would be 50%. Percentages are most useful when comparing within your school. So looking at across time, different year groups, or key groups. In this example shown here, a score of 61% for factor 1 puts the cohort in the 21st percentile, meaning that they are equally as or more positive than 21% of the standardization sample on that measure, but less positive than 79%. So, how do the two types of scores relate to each other? When looking at the scores together, it is worth noting that the distribution of national scores is not even. Small increases in the non-standardized percentage scores can lead to large increases in percentile scores, especially where a school crosses a percentile rank threshold between two surveys. In the example on screen, we can see that the students in this group, on average, responded positively to 60% of the questions in relation to perceived learning capability. Remember, mean percentage scores are the easiest piece of data to use for comparisons across time or groups of students. Where percentiles are shown for individuals, these scores represent a comparison to other individual students in the standardization sample. Where percentiles are shown for cohorts, these scores represent a comparison to other cohorts in the standardization sample. In the example on screen, whilst the mean percentage for perceived learning capability is 60%, this comes out as the 7.5th percentile when compared against the standardization. You'll find that percentiles are easily interpreted within the pass reports due to their color coding. Before we move on, I want to quickly remind you about the PASS interventions, as it's an integral part of the cycle. The PASS interventions website suggests a number of effective strategies that you can employ depending on the scores you are seeing in your own reports. We'll look at it in more detail later. In this next section, we will look at the PASS PDF group report. Your PDF PASS report breaks down into 3 levels of analysis. Level 1, which you can see here, is the whole cohort analysis. This level of analysis allows for a clear overview of the school or group as a whole, helping to identify key areas which require further improvements or those areas that can be celebrated. These scores are particularly useful for senior leadership teams to obtain an overall view of how students feel about the school or group as a whole. If we take this school as an example, we can see that confidence in learning and attitudes to attendance are the most positive factors that can be celebrated. Something is clearly going right in these areas, as well as others. It can also quickly be identified that further support is required across the school to help students feel prepared to learn and feel more positively towards their teachers. The next step is to consider level 2 analysis. This level of analysis will enable you to drill down into the scores even further and see if there are particular differences or similarities between year groups. You can identify whole school strengths or issues, then use the report information to drill down into the demographics to allow for really focused and meaningful interventions where applicable. On screen here, you can see a bar chart representing the PASS percentage scores for each factor by year group. From looking at the bar charts, we can see that the light blue bars, representing year 7, are generally lower than the others. This could be because this is a transition year and students are feeling less confident about their abilities in more challenging lessons, perhaps nervous about their first year in secondary and feeling anxious and underprepared for the new environments. We can also see from the percentiles that year 7 have quite low scores for factors 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8 when compared to the standardization. This would be a key year group the school would work with to ensure a smooth transition from primary or elementary years. What we can also determine from the bar chart is that students' attitudes tend to improve over time, suggesting that there is effective support in place for students at this school. However, factors 3 and 9 appear to be negatively impacted in years 10 and 11. The bar chart shows these year groups scoring lower than the others, and the percentiles also highlight that the scores for these factors are low when compared against the standardizations. This is quite concerning, as it tends to be these year groups that are in preparation for important examinations. In fact, the upcoming examinations could be what is impacting the scores. Taking this into account, the schools can put targeted measures in place to support their older students at key times over the year. The level 2 analysis also includes a breakdown of the cohorts into various key groups, such as year group, EAL, ethnicity, SEND, and any custom groups that were included when students' data were uploaded onto the TestWise system. We recommend that you work your way through your key group analysis to understand which groups you might be able to support better in order to improve your whole cohort picture. In this example, we can see that girls generally feel less positive than boys. So, how can we work with the girls to improve their feelings towards themselves and school? Once you've looked at levels 1 and 2, you may want to ask yourself some key questions. What trends can you see from the bar chart in your PASS report? Are there any key differences or similarities between year groups? What could be influencing the scores? And then, What strategies could you use to maintain or increase the attitudinal scores? Remember, you can use the past interventions for ideas for these questions. The final part of the report, level 3, looks at individual and item level analysis. When looking at the individual analysis, think about what is going to be most useful to you. Your eye is drawn to the students with reds or ambers across the board, but you will probably know them already and may already be working with them. It's the students with the occasional red or amber pockets who are probably the most interesting to look into. They may not be displaying any behavioral signs yet, but there could be underlying issues that, if addressed quickly, could prevent escalation. Also, look at those with high green across the board. Don't forget to think about what is working well for some students. Let's look at the scores for Sarah Granger. Often the first colour we tend to look out for, Sarah's scores are all in the red. She has very low percentile scores in all 9 factors. You may have students like Sarah in your own school and may already have identified her as someone of concern and she may already be receiving additional support. If so, is this support effective? Is there any other additional support that they could benefit from? For students with very low scores across all of the factors, PASS can help you to not only identify them, but also to monitor the success of the support strategies you put in place. PASS interventions will also help with further ideas of strategies to try. Once the student takes PASS again, leaving at least 12 weeks between test points though, the impact of any new interventions can hopefully be seen. The next student to highlight is Amy Benson. Amy has scored highly in some factors, 1, 5, and 8, but very low in others, 2, 4, and 7. We can see that the contextual factors are quite positive. Amy appears to feel happy in school and quite possibly presents herself as a confident learner who is content in the school environment. However, the low scores relate to how she feels about herself as a learner and how she engages with her work. It is important to identify students like Amy, as they could be overlooked in school because on the surface, they appear as though they do not have any attitudinal barriers. Charlotte O'Hara is another student who may be overlooked without PASS. She has high percentile scores across all of the factors, except for general work ethic. Whilst other profiles may appear more alarming at first glance, students like Charlotte can be easily missed. If these students are not quickly identified and appropriately supported, it could have further implications later on. An Excel report can also be produced, showing the same information that is contained within the PDF. The benefit of the Excel report is that, as a school, you can manipulate the data how you wish. You can also use the filter and sort functions in Excel to locate information for specific groups according to your own criteria. In this section, we are going to look at how past data can be linked up with CAP4 information. The learning environment, learner self-concept, and learner motivations are likely predictors of future attainment, behaviours, and later life outcomes. It is therefore crucial that schools not only assess their students' academic potential and attainment, but also whether there are attitudinal barriers that may be impacting performance. In any case, if academic intervention has been tried without success, triangulating PASS and CAP4 may provide some further insights as how best to support your students. By plotting your CAP4 mean score data against perceived learning capability data, you can gain greater insights. A good place to start in terms of comparing data is by plotting your CAP4 data against Factor 2 perceived learning capability data. For example, as you can see on screen, those with high CAP4 scores and high perceived learning capability are likely to achieve their potential as they have a very positive view of their abilities. These students can be found in the top right quadrant, coloured blue here. Those with low scores across both CAP 4 and perceived learning capability can benefit from identification and support in the form of mentoring. These students can be found in the bottom left quadrant, coloured yellow here. Learners that perceive themselves as less capable than they are considered fragile learners. These are the students in the bottom right quadrant. They have high CAP 4 scores, but low perceived learning capability scores. Using PASS and CAP 4 can help you spot these students and support them. Finally, your next steps. Our recommended actions following this webinar and where you can find further support on our website and training hub. The PASS interventions can be found on your TestWise account homepage. The web page can be easily navigated using the 4 titles on the top of the page: Home, Factors and Interventions, School Stories, and Sample Reports. By selecting the Factors and Interventions tab, you will be able to navigate between all 9 factors. Continuing our focus on fragile learners, I'm going to take a look at the factor 2, perceived learning capability. All 9 factors are displayed in a similar way. At the top of the page here, there is a Navigate this tab page. This will provide a drop-down list of all areas within the page. You can choose to select areas within the page to explore, or you may want to simply scroll down. The page begins with a detailed introduction of the measure. Next, you will find the area inside the classroom. This may be an area of particular interest which you may want to highlight to staff. It provides an overview of students' introvert and extrovert behaviours, which can indicate difficulties within a particular factor. We know that responses are a snapshot of that moment in time, and so issues may arise in students' lives at any point, which can be missed between completing surveys. Early intervention is key. So being familiar with how a student's behaviour is changing, even in the most subtle way, is key. Further down the page are a range of thought-provoking questions at whole school, group, and individual levels. Again, these can be found by selecting questions to ask from the drop-down list, or by continuing to scroll down the page. These questions can aid how we can embed the skills needed within school culture to support students' holistic development alongside academic teaching. For example, at a whole school level, you may wish to look at how well you as a school place an importance celebrating progress or achievement. At a class level, you may wish to ask if teachers talk with students about feeling successful and understanding their success criteria. And then, at an individual level, you may wish to ask if students understand their strengths and weaknesses and have strong problem-solving skills. Following on from here are the intervention strategies, each with a link in its title to various activities you may wish to carry out with students. For example, the intervention measuring progress provides activities such as how to clearly communicate the success criteria and how to use advanced organizers. Each activity provides a short explanation on how to incorporate them into your lessons. Before we begin this session, take a moment to reflect on the well-being and pastoral support already offered in your school. What strategies are already in place? What has been their impact so far? Can you use these strategies to support other students identified in the PASS report? As highlighted in the intervention cycle, we recommend considering how you will use the data to monitor the impact of your strategies and interventions over time, and also how you can utilize the PASS interventions for ideas. Okay, I'm going to pause there and give my colleague Anne the chance to share some of the questions that have been coming in during the presentation. Anne, are there any questions that have come through there which...
Hi, we've actually had a few that were emailed in. So the first one was just if you could give us a bit more information about recommending sharing results with parents and just how you can discuss the survey with parents.
Okay, that's a really, really good question. Some of our schools do find it extremely useful to share paths to support wider discussions about a child's learning. Like any assessment data, however, it would need to be made clear that it is, after all, a snapshot in time. But understanding underlying issues in any of the areas reported on in paths can help school teams and parents hold the right conversations and build a child's confidence and resilience to get them back on track.
Okay, great. Well, that sort of leads on to the next one that we've got quite well. The next one is just asking for clarification of how to use paths to measure the intervention. So if you've engaged with your past interventions, again, what's next in terms of measuring?
Yeah. I mean, as I said in the presentation, we do recommend that pass is administered again after a minimum period of around 12 weeks, and where interventions have been put in place following the administration of the PASS survey. Many of our schools do then use that PASS survey again to consider changes in attitude over that time.
Okay, that's helpful. And then we've just got one left, which is just wanting some clarification about some of the actual factors. So specifically the difference between learner self-regard and perceived learning capability.
Okay, yeah, important information. Learner self-regard is a more longitudinal measure of a pupil's thoughts about themselves as a learner, whereas perceived learning capability provides a snapshot of how ready the pupils feel to learn at that moment in time. These two measures can be really informative. Ideally, they would largely be in line with one another. If not, it may be worth further exploration.
Okay, great. That was it so far. I think we probably need to be careful of time. So any other questions that come in, we will email them out, of course, as we will with the presentation. So please don't worry if we didn't get to your question.
Great. Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you very much for joining us today. As stated at the start of this webinar, you will be receiving a copy of the slides for you to look through in your own time and access the links mentioned throughout. Finally, we do offer a range of further supports. Here you can see the link to our support guides for PASS. These are all held on our support page. We also have a range of training available to you. The majority of our training is self-guided, and you can find all the information you need, including signing up sessions on our training sites. We also have a number of case studies that illustrate how various schools use PASS. You may find this helpful, and again, this is linked in the slide. Should you have any questions, as my colleague Anne says, or comments, please feel free to get in touch. And I think all that leaves is for me to wish you all the very best this academic year and to thank you again for attending this webinar today.